afternoon, everyone. Thanks to Elets and the organizers for the opportunity to be a part of this event. Let me start with a bit of a global perspective and where we stand relative to that. We are essentially a consultant in financial inclusion in retail banking and G2P, government payments and other payment kind of programs, and we work in about 40 countries, emerging markets globally. So if you see many of the other emerging markets, the banking penetration there is much lower, and therefore adoption of technology and digital tools, mobile money, etc. Came in handy, and a number of different players who started competing with banks, particularly mobile network operators, etc. They came in. So many of you would have probably heard of M-Pesa, Safaricom, Tigo Money, Wing, and so on. And many of these are well-known names, and they have many customers who started using their services because banking was not available to those customers. But over a period of time, if we see most of the services that they have stayed focused on is payments, particularly sending money from one place to another, and many of them use it for sending money back home. They work in cities, they are migrants, so they send money back home. Some of it is used for, say, paying utility bills or airtime top-up. But it has kind of stagnated there for some years now. And additional use cases of banking have not really matured much. So one feels really proud when we see how India has evolved, and the India stack of platforms that, and the vision behind it. Even though mobile money, etc., is still getting, it doesn't have the kind of scale that maybe even some of the other markets, much smaller markets like Kenya, Uganda might have. But the accelerated pace and the rapid speed and the overall vision that we have, I think it's making us stand out in the global landscape. And many markets are now looking towards India for this architecture that we have adopted. So, the India stack, if you see, the foundation of that is platforms like Aadhaar, and we've heard about that. Aadhaar Payments Bridge, Aadhaar-enabled payment system, and then building on top of that, platforms like Unified Payments Interface, Bharat Bill Payment Service, etc., that Mr. Ratnakar spoke about. And these are likely to be game changers in the way one is able to transact. And as Mr. Ratnakar described, for example, today if one has to make payments or send money, it is one still needs to know the account number, maybe account number and IFSC code of the destination bank or the recipient. But with the interface like Unified Payments Interface, a simple address like Mr. Ratnakar mentioned, Ratnakar at buybank.com, with that simple interface, one can actually transact, and there is also the power of merchants and payments where you can actually pull. So a merchant, a grocery shop or a kirana store you go to, you buy something, and the merchant can actually create a pull transaction wherein even if the payer is not so literate or not so savvy in being able to use technology, they can get more included in that kind of a journey. So getting a little bit more into, we did some studies around how some of these technologies, not only from a consumer standpoint, of course, it makes a lot of sense for the consumers. It gives them convenience, it gives them access, it opens up new opportunities for consumers, merchants, and so on. but also from the provider standpoint. So we did a study around one element of India stack. So basically KYC processes and use of e-KYC, and Mr. Ratnakar spoke about it earlier. So what we looked at was about 20 different banks. There are also prepaid instrument issuers who are having a license largely for payment services. We looked at some of the mobile money wallets and other providers of that nature. And we try to compare, what is the customer experience, what is the lead time in doing KYC, what is the cost involved. And the findings were very revealing. So some of the banks, even some of the leading public sector banks, we found that the end-to-end lead time, and this is from the time a customer walks in or the customer account opening process is initiated, to the entire journey of account activation, collection of KYC documents, putting them into, and sometimes 2 or 3 rounds of authentication. So there is maker checker at the front end, then there is some of the banks follow a process of another round of verification at the back end, and then those documents in batches are sent for storage and so on. Again, processes differ from banks to banks. But the extreme that we found was as many as 30 days from a customer walks in to the entire process getting completed, for that particular customer case. And the costs were as high as 700 to 1,000 rupees. These were direct costs that were involved in opening an account. And at the other end, if we look at how some of the innovative banks and institutions, even many banks have enabled their business correspondents or partners to do KYC for them, and they are really the front end as far as the banks are concerned. So those who are using e-KYC, we found that the account gets opened in actually if the network is working fine in less than a minute, but the entire process of opening an account and giving a kit, in 5 minutes a customer can actually walk out of an outlet or a branch with e-KYC. And the costs across a range of institutions were somewhere in the range of 25 to 50 rupees. So huge difference, and we extrapolated that to see what kind of savings it would mean. And it runs into tens of thousands of crores for the sector as a whole if e-KYC were to be adopted. We also recommended other institutions like mobile network operators. So in the last month and a half, there have been new regulations announced by TRAI, and a number of mobile operators have already introduced e-KYC. In fact, we were having a discussion, and players like Reliance Jio, from day one itself, you walk in and you can get a SIM using e-KYC. So all these are really game changers in how not only the banking industry but also others who are providing services using this digital platforms can make good use of those, and it's convenient, makes a lot of difference for the customers, and there are huge advantages and direct cost savings that are possible for the institutions. One final thing I wanted to touch upon was around financial education and financial literacy. So while from a supply side there is a lot that's happening, we still find, and we also do a lot of consumer research. We try to understand from the consumer standpoint what they need and what are their unmet needs, and we find financial literacy is a big area where a lot of work has to be done. We did a survey around understanding of, for example, under the PM Jan Dhan Yojana and PM Suraksha Yojana, Bima Yojana, Atal Pension, and all those schemes which have been hugely successful as far as subscriptions are concerned. But in our surveys, we found that a lot of people still not aware of it, or even when they are aware, sometimes access is not there. So they go to a branch and they are told that this scheme is not available here. So on financial literacy, we have tried various digital platforms, and there has been good success, and we compare those to, for example, the traditional way has been using financial literacy centers and our cities and Rudy cities, etc., for consumer literacy. So we have tried to experiment with a number of digital platforms, IVR-based platforms, online, using a range of audio, visual kind of methods, and that has been quite a good success. So just food for thought in terms of, when you look at some of those areas. And again, we are also sort of not-for-profit entity. Many of these platforms and services can be available, so you can reach out if you would like to make use of those. But many of the banks who are using it and adopting it, they are finding a huge difference in being able to pass on financial education and financial literacy, both for their front-end staff.
Guruji, little time constraint.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.